On a bitter winter night, a weary black woman, clutching vital medicine for her ailing mother, paused. Through the swirling snow she spotted a lone, shivering white boy, his arm hidden, clearly injured. Without a second thought she brought him into her home, offering food, warmth, and refuge. Little did she know this single act of kindness would change her life forever. Before we delve into this poignant tale, tell us where you're watching from. We love to hear your thoughts. The wind howled like a hungry ghost through East Brooklyn's narrow alleys, whispering past shuttered shops and rattling the rusted gates of the laundromat. Snow swirled in thick, slow spirals, dusting cracked window ledges and long-abandoned park benches. From the second-story window of a tired clinic, a pale yellow light spilled onto the icy pavement below. Inside, Danielle Johnson sat beside her mother in the waiting room, her fingers tightly clasped around a brown paper pharmacy bag, warm from her palm, damp at the corners. Her diner shift had ended late and tips were meager, but she'd rushed through slush and biting wind to collect the insulin before the pharmacy closed. Danielle, barely 25, was a tall, slender black woman with skin like rich earth and eyes that held a burden beyond her years. Her tightly coiled hair was pulled into a frizzy bun, and under the harsh fluorescent glow, the stress lines on her brow seemed etched deeper than they should. Her coat was too thin for the biting cold, its seams fraying at the cuffs, and one boot had a split sole that let the frigid water seep in. Yet her grip on the paper bag was unwavering, as if it contained more than medicine, as if it held hope itself. Her mother, Miss Hattie, coughed beside her, a dry, sharp sound, each breath like a match striking air. The older woman, in her mid-60s, with softer brown skin and strands of silver woven through her once cold jacket braids, sat hunched beneath a faded shawl. Her cheeks were hollow, her lips dry, but her eyes still held an inherent dignity that life hadn't managed to steal. Danielle leaned in, brushing snowflakes from her mother's shoulders, whispering, "Mama, hold on. I won't let you go through this alone. Not ever." Her voice was low, steady, almost stubborn. The older woman gave a faint nod, her lips pressed tight to mask the pain. She needed air or silence or both. Danielle rose and walked toward the end of the hallway, where a heavy door led to the outer balcony. The cold slapped her cheeks the moment she stepped out. She exhaled, watching her breath curl in the frigid air. The banister was slick with ice and flakes still fell lazily, glowing beneath the street lamp's halo across the road. Pulling her phone from her pocket, she checked for messages, but the signal was weak. Then came a sound, soft, almost lost beneath the whistling wind. A whimper. It wasn't from a dog nor an adult. Something in it trembled, fragile and sharp like glass on edge. Her eyes darted across the snow-covered courtyard below, and there, just beneath the crooked fire escape, sat a small figure huddled against the base of a leafless tree. A boy no older than 10, his skin pale, shock-blonde hair matted to his forehead. His right arm was cradled tightly to his chest, twisted in a way that made Danielle's stomach knot. His hoodie was thin, damp, useless against the snow. His legs shook, his face had gone ghost white, and his lips were tinged a dangerous blue. Her breath hitched. She gripped the cold metal railing, then without hesitation turned on her heel and ran down the hallway, past the nurse's desk, down the stairwell, her boots slapping against the concrete steps. "Hey baby, what are you doing out here?" she cried as she dropped to her knees in the snow beside him. Her voice wasn't panicked, but urgent, firm, as if she'd said these kinds of things before to those she loved. "Are you lost? Where's your family?" The boy looked up, eyes wide but unfocused, his cheeks blotched red from the cold. He flinched as she reached for him, then mumbled, barely audible, "Don't take me back. I don't want to go back, please." Danielle paused, brows furrowed, heart pounding. She wrapped her scarf around his shoulders, pressing it gently down, using the warmth of her own body as a shield against the wind. Her hands trembled, not from cold, but from the fierce way her instincts roared to life. The boy was freezing, alone, terrified. Something deep and fierce stirred within her. "You're not going back anywhere tonight, okay?" she said gently, brushing melting flakes from his lashes. "You're safe now, I promise." Her voice had softened, the kind of softness you develop after long nights watching someone you love suffer and not being able to fix it, only hold them tighter. She didn't know who he was or where he came from. She didn't need to. All she knew was that no child should be left to suffer alone in the snow, not while she was still breathing. And just like that, without waiting for permission, Danielle Johnson picked up the trembling boy, holding his frail body against her chest. The snow kept falling as she walked toward the streetlight and disappeared with him into the city's shadows, her footsteps slow, deliberate, a silent vow echoing in her every step. No one gets left behind tonight. The door to Danielle's apartment creaked open with the stiff resistance of wood swollen by moisture and time. She nudged it with her hip, balancing the shivering boy in her arms, then kicked it shut behind her. The warmth inside wasn't much. The radiator wheezed like an old man with tired lungs, but it was enough to melt the frost clinging to Elliot's lashes. The room smelled of cinnamon tea and worn books, of lived-in poverty with hints of dignity. Yellowed walls bore framed photos of Danielle and her mother, and on the kitchen counter, a chipped mug still held half a cup of cold herbal tea. Her mother, Hattie, sat hunched in the recliner, a thin blanket over her lap, hands trembling slightly as she clutched a heating pad. Her face, the shade of deep mahogany, creased in concern when she saw Danielle enter not alone. "Who's that, baby?" Her voice was soft, hoarse, as if each syllable cost her strength. Danielle moved quickly, laying the boy on the old couch. "I found him outside the clinic, Mama. He was freezing, alone." Her voice was low but urgent, as if she was still coming to terms with her own decision. She unwrapped her scarf from the boy's shoulders, then disappeared into the kitchen. Within minutes, a pot was on the stove, steam rising from chicken broth scavenged from the back of the pantry. She pulled out a towel, soaked it in warm water, and knelt beside Elliot. The boy had curled in on himself, lips moving silently. She dabbed his face gently, and when he flinched she spoke, "It's okay, kiddo. No one's going to hurt you here. You're safe. You're warm." Danielle studied him for a long moment, then said gently, "Can you tell me your name? Where you live? Someone must be looking for you." The boy turned his face away, eyes fixed on the corner of the room. "Don't know," he muttered. After a pause he added, "Mom said not to tell grown-ups. Don't help. They just send you back." Danielle's heart squeezed, but she kept her voice calm. "Back where, sweetheart?" He shook his head, burrowing deeper under the scarf. "If I say they'll find me. They always do." She didn't push. She didn't pry. Instead she sat beside him, one hand gently wiping his forehead, the other resting over his, offering warmth more than questions. "All right," she said quietly. "You don't have to say anything until you're ready. Just rest. No one's taking you anywhere tonight." He opened his eyes just barely and whispered, "Why?" She paused, the rag dripping back into the bowl. "Because someone should have done it for me when I was little," she said, more to herself than to him. Her mother, still watching from the chair, added in a whisper, "Every soul deserves to be warmed, sugar, even the lost ones." Elliot's fever broke just after midnight, but the shivers didn't stop. Danielle didn't sleep. She stayed by the couch, alternating between wiping his forehead and rubbing his fingers between hers to keep the blood moving. When he whimpered, she read softly from an old picture book she found tucked under the TV stand. He didn't respond much, but he didn't pull away either. The snow outside continued to fall in a curtain of silence, blanketing the street below, softening the edges of the world. Inside, the glow of the table lamp cast long shadows along the floor, turning that cramped living room into a sanctuary. In the early morning hours, Elliot stirred, sweat clinging to his hair. Danielle was perched on the edge of the coffee table, half asleep, spooning warm oatmeal into a bowl when he sat up abruptly and winced. She was instantly at his side. "Easy there," she said, voice still husky with fatigue. "You gave us quite the scare." He looked at her, really looked. There was confusion in his eyes, but also something fragile like trust trying to grow roots in frozen soil. "They're always poking me. I hate it," he muttered. "I hate the machines. I just wanted to be somewhere else." Danielle's lips parted slightly, but she said nothing. Instead she reached for a spoonful of oatmeal, blew on it gently and held it out to him. "Here. No needles, no machines. Just oats, sugar and some cinnamon I swiped from the diner." Her smile was small, tired but real. He took the spoon, it clinked softly against his teeth as he ate. The silence between them was full, not empty. Later that morning, as the sun tried to break through the slate-gray clouds, Danielle buttoned her coat to head down the block for more medicine. Elliot was resting, wrapped in a second blanket her mother had pulled from the closet. She paused at the door, looked back once more, then came the sound of tires crunching snow, low, heavy and deliberate. She stepped out just in time to see 3 black SUVs pulling to a halt in front of the building, the kind of cars that didn't belong on this side of Brooklyn. 4 men in tailored coats stepped out first, scanning the street with precision and purpose. Then the last door opened. He emerged with the slow command of someone used to people stepping aside for him. Tall, sharp-featured, a coat pressed crisp over a charcoal suit, scarf folded like a banknote. His silver hair was slicked back and his eyes, cold steel, locked immediately on her as if she'd been a problem to solve. "Are you Danielle Johnson?" he asked, voice low but lethal. He blinked, stunned. "Yes, he snapped, marching past her toward the door. "You have 10 seconds to explain before I call the police. I warned the authorities about these blocks and here we are." She stepped in his path, arms slightly out, not confrontational, just firm. Her pulse raced but her tone didn't waver. "Sir, with all due respect, your son was in the snow alone, sick. He could have, spare me," he cut in, brushing past her. "This neighborhood is full of people looking for a payout. Don't pretend this wasn't orchestrated." His words hit like ice water. Inside the apartment, her mother had risen weakly from the recliner, one hand on the couch where Elliot still slept, unaware. Danielle moved slowly, calmly, but with a weighty resolve behind her steps. "I didn't ask for anything from you," she said, voice taut now, no longer soft. "I brought him in because he was a boy in trouble. That's all." Richard Lancaster turned slowly. For a second, his eyes flickered with something. Not guilt, not yet understanding, but the beginning of confusion. He looked down at his son, wrapped in a blanket that didn't match his world of private clinics and marble floors. Then Elliot stirred and whispered in his sleep, "Don't send me back, please, no more." Danielle's jaw tightened. She didn't need to say another word. The boy had spoken more than enough, and in that single moment the frost began to crack. "I ran away," Elliot continued, his voice growing steadier. "I didn't want the treatments. I didn't want more pain. They keep saying it helps, but it doesn't, it just hurts and no one listens." The boy looked at Danielle, then at her mother, then back at his father. "But she did. She let me be a kid for one night. She made soup. She told stories. She didn't treat me like I was broken, just like I mattered." Richard's mouth parted slightly, but no words came. He looked down at his son, his only child, wrapped in a second-hand blanket in a stranger's home, speaking more freely than he ever had in their sprawling estate filled with hired staff and hushed corridors. Danielle watched him closely, not for vindication but for recognition. She didn't need an apology, she needed him to see. Slowly, Richard stepped forward, eyes never leaving Elliot. "I didn't know you felt that way," he said quietly, voice stripped of its edge. I thought the best care, the best doctors. You thought money fixed things," Elliot said simply. "But it doesn't fix lonely." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was transformative. It hung in the air like warm breath in cold morning light. For the first time, Richard looked around the small apartment, not with judgment but with awareness. The peeling paint, the smell of broth still hanging in the air, the worn slippers at Hattie's feet, all told a story of survival, not exploitation. "I owe you both an apology," he said, turning to Danielle, then to Hattie. "I was wrong about everything." Danielle didn't smile, but her shoulders softened. Her voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "He didn't need much. Just a night where he wasn't a diagnosis." Richard nodded slowly, then reached into his coat, pulled out a slim checkbook. He scribbled something, tore the slip, extended it to her. She glanced at the number, staggering, but shook her head. "I don't want that," she said, lifting her chin. "I didn't help him for money. I helped because he needed it." For a second he looked like a man unarmed. Then something surprising happened. He laughed, a single breathy sound of disbelief, and tucked the check back into his coat. "All right then," he said. "Maybe I can offer something else. A job at my foundation. We work with communities, real ones. We could use someone who sees." Danielle hesitated, unsure. Sounded surreal, impossible. But she met his eyes, steady and clear. "And my mother? I'll take care of her treatment," he said immediately. "That's not a handout. That's repayment for what you gave my son that I couldn't." She didn't cry, not then. Instead, she walked over to Elliot, adjusted the blanket around his shoulders, then looked back at Richard and nodded once. Outside, the snow had slowed, flakes drifting soft and sparse now, like the sky had exhaled. Across the street, the neighbors quietly stepped away from their windows. The show was over, but something else had begun. The elevator of the Lancaster Foundation hummed as it climbed. Danielle stood inside, gripping a worn leather notebook like it was armor. Outside the glass panels, the Manhattan skyline glittered under winter sunlight, but her reflection in the chrome doors told a different story. Tired eyes, a borrowed blazer, and a heart pounding beneath fabric that still smelled faintly of home-cooked soup and laundry dried on radiators. She'd been here for 3 weeks now, assistant project coordinator, a title that sounded bigger than the corner desk they gave her near the hallway printer, where the heater clanked and rattled like it was protesting her presence. She hadn't seen Richard since the morning he'd offered her the position. A quiet nod in the lobby, that was all. No special meetings, no favors, no safety net. The office floor opened to white marble and glass, clinical, sleek and cold. Staff bustled past in tailored coats, murmuring in buzzword-laced tones about partnerships, capital and strategy. Danielle greeted them with a polite smile, always met with brief nods or vacant glances. She noticed it, the flicker in their eyes when she introduced herself. Oh, that's her. The woman from the incident. The one from Brooklyn. The one with the story. During a morning briefing, she stood to share an idea. A program for music therapy targeted at children with disabilities, rooted in Elliot's experience but presented with structure. Her voice didn't waver, but the silence after she finished did. It stretched. Then came the sound of a chair shifting. Miranda Talcott, the senior director of programming, mid-40s, ivory blonde, fitted navy blazer, the kind of woman who never misplaced a decimal, cleared her throat with the elegance of a piano key being tapped too hard. Danielle, she said smoothly, that's very heartfelt but not quite scalable. We're looking for measurable impact, not sentiment. Her smile was tight. Thank you for sharing. Danielle sat back down slowly, cheeks hot. The meeting moved on without missing a beat, the words realistic and budget-aligned replacing anything she had just said. No one looked her way. That night, in the fluorescent-lit restroom, Danielle locked herself in the last stall, knees curled to her chest. She didn't cry loudly, she let the tears fall silently, head pressed against the cool tile. In her pocket was a photo Elliot had mailed her, drawn with shaky lines. A stick-figure woman beside a curly-haired kid under a big sun, with the words, "Thank you for not giving up on me." She clutched it for a long moment, then stood, wiped her face, fixed her hair, looked in the mirror and whispered, "You've been through worse." The following week brought a quarterly pitch session. Senior staff, major donors, and Richard himself would be in attendance. Danielle hadn't been invited to present. She didn't expect to be. But she printed her revised proposal anyway, this time with data, pilot program plans, and outreach partners from her old neighborhood who had agreed to volunteer if given the chance. She stood at the back of the room, note folder in hand, watching as project after project was shot down, gently but firmly. Too narrow, not proven, lack synergy. Then came the final proposal. A large-budget tech partnership meant to bring virtual wellness seminars to underprivileged schools. Costly, glossy, and soulless. After a long pause, Richard Lancaster raised a hand from the end of the conference table. "Is there anyone else?" he said evenly. "Perhaps someone we haven't heard from yet?" All heads turned toward him, then slowly toward Danielle. Her stomach tightened. Her feet moved before her brain could protest. She stepped to the front, placing her folder on the table. Her palms were damp, but her voice when it came was sure. "I'd like to present a community-based program called Second Voice," she began. "It's focused on children with chronic illness or disabilities who struggle to express what they feel. The idea is to use music not as performance, but as connection, expression, healing." She didn't use slides, just her voice. "Last winter I found a child outside a hospital, sick, scared, not because the doctors failed but because the world around him had stopped listening. What helped him wasn't a prescription. It was a bowl of soup, a quiet song, a story, and space to just be a kid." She paused. The room was still. "I've been poor. I've been unseen. And I've been helped not out of pity but dignity. This project isn't about charity. It's about giving people their voices back. I've done the groundwork. The volunteers, the logistics. It's ready." When she finished there was silence, long hole. Then someone at the table exhaled and said softly, "That was powerful." A single clap broke the stillness, then another. Richard didn't speak. He only looked at her across the room, and when she met his eyes she saw something new in them. Not obligation, not guilt, but respect. When the meeting adjourned, Miranda brushed past Danielle with a neutral smile. "Good presentation," she said, too quick. Danielle didn't respond. He didn't need to. Later that day, a message appeared in her inbox. "Program approved. Full budget. Welcome to the real work." Danielle leaned back in her chair, eyes closed for a moment. Then she pulled the stick figure drawing from her pocket, smoothed its creases and pinned it above her desk. Her desk in an office with her name on the door. Second voice had begun, and she hadn't just earned a seat at the table. She'd built one. Snow fell again the morning the Elliott Circle opened its doors. Not the heavy, cruel snow of that night months ago, but soft, feathered flakes drifting through the gray light, settling gently over the sidewalk outside the new community center on Myrtle Avenue. The building stood where an abandoned pharmacy once crumbled, now transformed. Bright glass windows, warm lights glowing from within, and a painted mural on one side showing children with instruments, their faces lit with joy and possibility. Above the entrance in brushed steel letters, "The Elliott Circle, a space to be heard." Danielle stood near the entrance, one hand on the small of her mother's back as they stepped carefully over the salted walkway. Hattie, her gait slow but steady, wore a deep burgundy coat, brand new, though she still refused to part with her faded knit hat. Her hand squeezed Danielle's briefly. "You made this, baby," she said, voice low and proud. Inside, the lobby buzzed with quiet movement, staff preparing instruments in rooms, volunteers setting up welcome tables, and children filtering in with parents. Some walking gingerly, others wheeled in, eyes wide with nervous hope. A few of them stared at the framed portrait in the hallway. A pencil sketch of a small boy wrapped in a blanket, one arm drawn close to his chest, the other reaching out. At the front of the room, a small wooden stage had been set up. A podium, a microphone, a folding chair for one boy in particular. Danielle adjusted the mic, smoothing a note card she hadn't written on. She didn't need it. Elliott approached slowly, his left hand still curled in, but his right holding a piece of folded paper. He wore a gray button-up with sleeves rolled just past the elbow, his sandy hair now neatly combed but still refusing to stay flat. His face had filled out slightly, less pale, more sure. Danielle knelt beside him, tucked his collar gently and whispered, "You ready?" He nodded once. "Kind of," he said, then added, "But it's okay to be scared, right?" Her eyes warmed. "It's okay to be everything." He climbed the 2 small steps up with effort but no hesitation. When he reached the mic, the room settled. His voice, when it came, was thin but clear. "Hi, I'm Elliott. I was scared a lot before. I didn't want more doctors or needles or quiet rooms that made me feel smaller. Then I met Miss Danielle. She gave me soup and stories and said I wasn't broken, just different." He held up the paper, hand shaking slightly. "She told me, music doesn't care if your fingers work right. It listens to your heart instead. So this place is for kids like me who don't always know how to say what hurts, but still need to be heard." The room didn't erupt with applause. It didn't need to. The silence that followed was the kind that wraps around you, warm and real. Richard stood at the back, hands folded in front of him, dressed simply in a charcoal coat and scarf. His expression wasn't pride, not exactly. It was something quieter, like recognition, as if he were finally seeing the full shape of what that snowy morning had set in motion. Danielle joined him as Elliott stepped down. She glanced at Richard, her voice barely above a breath. "He's becoming something no doctor ever promised." He nodded slowly. "Because someone gave him space to become it." They watched the children gather in the music room, where soft notes of piano began to rise from under small, clumsy fingers. Hesitant at first, then more certain. One girl giggled when she hit the wrong note. A boy beside her tried again, slower. No one corrected them. That was the point. Later that afternoon, as the ribbon was cut and local press snapped photos, Danielle and Hattie stood together in the snow-dusted courtyard. Across the street, the old apartment still leaned under time, but its windows gleamed with sunlight. It was no longer just the place where this began. It had become proof of survival, of small kindnesses, of quiet revolutions. Danielle looked up at the engraved plaque by the entrance. It read, "Warmth isn't found in fire. It's found in compassion." The words pulsed with meaning only those who had once known cold could truly feel. Richard approached, his steps deliberate but without his usual command. He looked from the plaque to her, then said in a voice gentler than she ever thought he had, "I came that morning to take back my son, and somehow found someone to walk forward with instead." She turned to him, her smile soft but unwavering. "And I," she said, "found something bigger than a new job. I found a family I never knew I needed." They stood together for a long moment, watching Elliot laugh with two boys beside a keyboard. Snow still falling in slow, delicate flakes around them. The world hadn't changed overnight, but something had shifted, and this time, it would echo far beyond the sidewalk. Because sometimes a hand offered in the cold is more than a gesture. It's a beginning. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.